So I think Lekha ma'am has joined us back, so we can resume. Can we, ma'am? Hello? Am I audible? Komal, have you started
Hello?
the recording? Yeah, Komal, have you started the recording?
Yeah.
Hello, Lekha ma'am, can we resume? Are you there?
I'm on board, yeah.
Yeah, so there's one question by Narinder Kumar. So he's been asking that you talked about holistic and comprehensive approach to tackle this pandemic. So can you tell us how we can combine human development approach to tackle the present pandemic? Would it be more sensible to adopt human security kind of a policy framework, as the need of the hour is to ensure security and impart optimism in the society?
Oh, very good question. That should be the thing. I enjoyed Mr. Narendra's question. It should be a human development approach rather than a growth-oriented approach in terms of strategizing our COVID policy response. In this case, I would like to highlight that, of course, what it takes to save life should be given importance, and at the same time, we need to tackle the other humanitarian considerations as well. In case of that interstate or intrastate migration crisis, and we are too late, and we have not yet adequately responded to this crisis. And had our paradigm been what Mr. Narendra has rightly pointed out, the human development paradigm, things would have happened long back. It's not a priority to the fullest point even today. So this is one of the concerns. It's not just life versus livelihood. It's life versus life. That's what he exactly mentioned by what he meant about this human development approach to this COVID. And that should be the thing which is happening in our economy, rather than focusing on our growth went to the negative levels. With the limited contents, we need to have our growth up to this level. Of course, growth is required, but growth is not everything. We need to at least move ahead that growth plus agenda to tackle this crisis. And that's it. Thank you for the question.
So I'll take up the next question, which is about the stimulus. So how much stimulus should be given in India? Is asked by Praveen Sankela. What percent of GDP it should be the ideal stimulus in India?
Oh, that's a tough question, Mr. Praveen. When compared to the other countries, as I mentioned in the first part of my presentation, it's nothing, because in US and in other countries, it's like around 10% of GDP. But in our country, it's just 1% of GDP. So we should be doing little more. But if you ask me what could be the strict quantum of that stimulus, I really don't know that magic number, but we need to work it out meticulously with the 5 points agenda which I mentioned. That the first is about the saving life, and of course giving importance to the medical professionals who are the frontline barriers. Second is how to tackle the migration crisis. Third is what is the impact of this policy lockdown on small firms, small enterprises in the informal sector. Whatever it takes to, you have to design policies for them before it is too late, because the extent of shock is quite huge. So these are the aspects in which we need to design a program. Of course, there should be a big basic income kind of the cash transfers program, plus the other kind of policy responses. And whatever it takes to do that package, that's the thing. I don't have a magic number for you, like what it could be in terms of the GDP, But what we responded yet is very insignificant.
I
Thanks,
think
Naveen.
I think in your recent paper published in EPW,
Yeah,
COVID-19 and macroeconomic uncertainty, you
yeah,
have explained this particular question in detail. So
absolutely. Praveen can
yeah,
take a look. Yeah,
everybody may refer to it. It was published on 11th of April, I believe. It's a very recent publication.
absolutely. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, yeah.
Since a similar kind of question is raised by Mr. Abdul. He's from University of Groningen. So one part of his question has already been answered about the fiscal stimulus. So one interesting aspect that is asking on is what options do we have in terms of policy for fiscal expansion?
Okay. Uh, Thanks for the question, Abdul. And regarding the fiscal expansion, I have mentioned already in my presentation about the macroeconomic policy constraints we have. Um, you know, Expansion in the sense how we improve our fiscal space. It has to do with rethinking about our deficit strategy. And I explained to you earlier, we need to go beyond this deficit is bad notion. Right now, you need to be so strict about your public debt to GDP ratio to be strictly 60%, with 20% for the states and 40 for the center. So you may uh, relax that a bit. And also you can play around with the maturity structure of your bond. That's what has happened in this UK or in the European Union context. What's it like? It's like a COVID bond, or you have bonds, but the refinancing issues won't be compelling in the short run if you go for the long term. So it's like the COVID bond, or it is even comparable to the war bonds which happened. Like I think my boss has mentioned this in his paper, Ratin Roy's paper. He talked about consoles, which was floated in the World War time. So such kind of bond we can think about regarding going for the fiscal expansion. So these are the two immediate things coming to my mind. One is the relaxation of your debt deficit limits. Second is going for a long-term bond. And of course, monetary policy makers also should be working in coordination with the fiscal policy makers. So this policy coordination between the Main Road and North Block can also give you a little bit of ease in the size of government or in improving the fiscal space. Yeah, that's it.
Right. So one more interesting question is put in by Dr. Shweta Kohli. So she's asking what major structural shifts in the economy you're expecting post COVID-19 situation.
That's this macroeconomic uncertainty, Shweta, I don't have any clue about it, because it's like it's so dynamic. It's changing so much. So at the aggregate and the disaggregate levels, how it's going to create a structural shift, I really don't know. And this also reminds me that debate earlier whether our growth is cyclical or structural. So we were grappling with this question, Shweta, even before this corona hit our economy. We were thinking that you must have read Geeta Gopinath's paper, that the emerging economic context, we don't even experience a business cycle. It's like it's all structural, that unless we structurally give an impetus to the economy, we won't get a growth rebounding to the original level. So the structural, that's a very tough question to answer. And, I give it a go, Shweta. I don't have a clue what could be that structural shift that will happen to the Indian economy post-COVID. Let's wait and see. It's too early to respond to that. Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to ask you, I read your paper and wherein you have referred about your earlier paper, which was published by NIPFP, which talks about the fiscal seniorage.
Yeah.
So can you just explain a little about it? What exactly it does mean when we talk about helicopter money, helicopter finance to manage the fiscal deficits?
Yeah. Yeah, this reminds me the confusion that's in the Indian economy, that whether the government of India is going to helicopter drop money to people. This is a confusion, and I have seen that in the Twitter, that it's a fake news and such kind of debates, and
Yeah.
they were blaming on the economists who were like, the proponents
Right.
of the MMT. But
It has happened just a while ago. It has happened just
that's
a while ago. Some new channel has played that news, and they
yeah.
have been talking about
Yeah.
putting on money in the pockets of people through helicopter, something like that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think there's a lot of confusion among the
right.
citizens regarding what exactly is the money financing of
Exactly.
deficit.
The concept is
Yeah,
very new for us. Yeah.
very new for. But I was thinking that we don't have quite a good memory power, because India was doing exactly this kind of financing deficits till late 80s. We were doing money financing of deficits. I don't think that in the childhood, maybe in our generation, or maybe in my mother's, I don't know whether people remember that we financed the deficit through printing money. That was happening in the Indian economy. It is not a new thing. But what exactly is a helicopter money? And we can read the books by Turner, that Between Death and Devil or something like that. And we can also read the writings by Boiter. And it's a kind of an idea where you money finance your deficit. And another variant of the helicopter money is like you drop money to, it's a cash transfer or something to the firms, to the people, so that it can trigger the economy. But as Rekhuram Rajan rightly pointed out, because this helicopter money was, quite popular when he was the governor, and our Ben Bernanke, he was called the helicopter Ben because he floated the idea of helicopter money. So he's called helicopter Ben. And basically, this idea of printing money and financing the deficit, that's not a weird thing at all, provided that it cannot be inflationary. Of course, excessive mode of any kind of financing deficit, that can have a macroeconomic consequence. But if you're judicious, I don't say no to money financing, especially when there is a crisis. Because the alternatives, there are three ways in which you can finance the deficit. One is money financing, second is bond financing, which is happening in our economy, and third is external financing. So if you're thinking about a shift in the financing pattern of deficits, I would urge the government of India to go for seigniorage of the money financing of deficit than external financing of deficits. That's what my take. Rather than going for a financial oligarchy deciding about our economy, I think we should be doing it through internal borrowing or internal dynamics. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, so there was much of a talk, especially from today afternoon, regarding this particular question.
Yeah.
So I'll be taking up the next question by Shubham Sanap. So he's asking about some measure taken by Fed Chairman Jerome Powell to save the small and medium businesses. Can India follow the same measures? So that is the question in most of the people's minds. When we are spending on economy, so who we should be spending upon?
Very good question. And Shubham's question, it gives me a dilemma of cost versus quantity. Whether the cost of credit matters here or whether it is a quantity of credit. This is an important question. And if the cost of credit, then we have reduced interest rate, and I don't know whether we have reduced it enough so that the economy can be stimulated, especially the small and medium firms. So that's one thing about the cost of credit. And second is about the quantity. So, about the liquidity in the system, such kind of things. And our monetary policy response, if you read the Monetary Policy Committee report, the recent Monetary Policy Committee report, I think there is a judicious, elements of judicious decision regarding improving liquidity in the economy as well. But we cannot just do what J. Paul has done in the US. We need to have the context specific and the country specific a package for that, and it has to be fiscal and monetary, because monetary alone may not be able to trigger the small firms. It has to be both monetary and fiscal, because monetary policy, whether it is rate or whether it is quantity, it may have its own limitations, and we should go for a policy coordination. Yeah.
Great.
Shubham, is it okay?
One more very interesting question coming up from Ms. Nitya. So she's asking whether isn't it the right time that we should shift from inflation targeting framework to a multiple indicators approach? As through inflation targeting, we are focusing more on price stability, and we are completely ignoring growth and employment, which basically doesn't factor in.
Oh, thank you so much, Nitya, for this question. 2 days back, I was talking to a group of students, and they also asked me the same question about the new monetary policy framework of our country. I understand that the young generation, they are very disturbed with this new monetary policy framework, which just confine the price stability as the main function or the sole function of RBI. But if you look at, when I was in university, it was not the case. It was like multi-indicators approach, and the RBI's function is much more wider than just focusing on just inflation. And it has got its own limitations. And this inflation targeting is based on a strict policy rule, like the Tyler rule, which we say that it's based on the inflation anchor, it's based on the inflationary expectations, and the second component is the output gap. So in this function, you have two unobserved variables to tackle. One is the inflationary expectations, which RBI has tackled through expectation survey. And in the policy output gap, your potential output is again unobserved variable. And the potential output, unless you do some econometric sophistication, this is what I was talking to my students 2 days back. We don't know what's our potential, and what we use in our modeling is we use filters, take out the cyclicality, and call that trend as potential. So we don't, because we are not a native economy, and we don't have that employment. We have that potential GDP. So it's an envelope, and we don't have much very good methodology to tackle this output gap, but still we are grappling with it and using econometric filters to arrive at the potential output. So given these quantitative limitations, philosophically also, is it okay that RBI focus only on price stability? To me, it's not, because if the growth suffers, now we cannot tell RBI or blame RBI, because through the agreement between the government of India and RBI, they are supposed to look into the price stability, not the economic growth. So such kind of policy dilemma, Nitya, I'm totally with you. I can understand your concern, and I also want a comprehensive monetary policy function, which was there earlier, because this kind of thought processes, I think it started with the Rekoragan's report on financial sector reforms in 2008. Then this policy thought was, advanced to this Ojit Patel recommendations. Then we had that International Finance Center by Misri. So many reports coming up, and the FSLRC report. So there, the regulatory function of RBI was taken away, even the public debt function. So everything was like dichotomized or trichotomized, and the RBI was asked only to look into the price stability. But the price stability itself is not a strictly monetary phenomenon in our country. So that also another limitation, like how you deal the structural or the supply side shocks through the inflation targeting properly. That's another concern.
Right.
Thank you for the question, Nitya.
Shavi, she's asking the same question that we just addressed. She's asking about helicopter economy, so I'll skip to it. And then Rajesh Kumar, he's just being optimistic about since there is lockdown and we don't have any demand right now. So are there any chances that when we come out of the lockdown, we would start recovering very fast than what we're expecting in a very pessimistic view?
Oh yeah, it's going to affect the economy because lockdown means it's an economic disruption. So
Right.
we're not expecting any V-shape or U-shape economic revival even BC, before Corona. We didn't expect that we will have a V-shape or a U-shape or a W or whatever shape revival.
Mhm.
So in such context, the economic revival or it takes time, and we have to be very careful about the tools we identify to tackle the recovery and the macro stabilization process before we think about economic growth, because now it's a stabilization is important, and then only comes the growth. So the tools which we require for stabilization may not be the tools which we require for growth. So we need to identify those things very judiciously. And yeah, quite pessimistic the situation, because economic disruptions, it's quite huge. And if you're going for a lockdown 3 without opening the economy in a staggered manner, uh, you know because that's why I was emphasizing on the aggressive testing and focused approach or the targeted approach regarding the public health crisis. So if you're doing that, then we will be confident to open the economy. Unless we go for, because India is nowhere in the ballpark regarding this aggressive testing. So that's a concern.
But don't you think that even if we get the good numbers with the GDP, Afghanistan was one of the most fastest growing GDP in the world when they just came out of the war. So even we get out and become the most, perhaps the growing economy in 2021, would that have any positive impact on employment as such? So that
Uh,
question would.
Yeah, good. First, two parts of the question. One is, are we going to see a revival post-COVID? Second is whether this revival in the growth will be, will not be jobless growth, but the
Right.
employment can also pick up. Usually, there is a lag in the way jobs pick up with the growth pick up. So that lag, especially, that's quite huge in the context of India. And
Exactly.
second regarding the revival, I keep my fingers crossed, because we need to work in certain sectors. It has to be the sector specific push we need to, follow to get our growth back on board. And we already knew that this is not a cyclical thing; it's very much structural, and the structural reforms will take its own sweet time for the response. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that in a way, if we can focus on the sectors that may produce some employment for us, then it can be worked out as a blessing in disguise. So I'll
Absolutely.
take up I'll take up the next question, which is by Mansi Gore. She's asking about your earlier explanation about daily wage laborers. So what exactly would be fiscal policy package for them right now, and policy change post COVID-19 for the wage laborers, wage earners?
Thank you, Manasi. The policy response should be income transfers, basic income transfers. That's the only way now, because if the country responded to the crisis, unlike the South Korea didn't go for a lockdown, a great lockdown policy. They have gone for the aggressive testing. If India has taken the path of great lockdown, we have to give adequate income transfers to the people who have lost jobs. That's the only way. And as a post-COVID strategy, it has to be a judicious mix of universal basic income and the participation income by giving them adequate employment opportunities. And we can revive our employer of last resort policy by revising the wage upward quite substantially. So it has to be a judicious mix of both participation income and basic income. That's the way we can respond. And of course, we have to give them, not only money, we have to give them the food, the kind, because, with the money, where they shop around in this context. So it has to be both kind and, the cash transfer. It's not the cash transfer alone.
Right. Next is by Shubham Ladha. He's asking about how to protect livelihoods with targeted fiscal measures. Can we take it up?
Yeah, sure. Because we are not ready to even open the economy
Right.
In this context, our livelihood, it is just giving them support. The social security is much more important now. But Shubham, as a post-COVID strategy, we need to think something different. But right now, it's like giving them cash transfer is very relevant because they lost their livelihood. And when we design our cities, we never thought that they were part of our cities. But only one state in India which responded very positively is Kerala regarding the livelihood issues of migrants and the daily wage earners. But that happened because as somebody asked me earlier also, the human development approach, who was mentioning that was the right kind of a paradigm. So Kerala had that human development paradigm in their policy making. So if you meticulously look into the finance minister's budget speeches, you can see that this migrant laborers and other livelihood issues were tackled much before this crisis. So, it's not overnight that has happened in Kerala. But that should be the model which we can follow in other parts of the country as well.
Right. Praveen is again asking about tax buoyancy. So can we elaborate something about tax buoyancy right now?
Okay. Praveen, tax buoyancy is nothing but how your tax respond to the GDP. It's like an elasticity concept, like 1% increase in GDP leads to 1% increase in your tax, or 0.5% increase in your tax, or 1.2% increase in tax. So it's basically a double log regression, if I say technically. That's a kind of elasticity. It's a responsiveness. So the values you may get 1, above 1, or below 1. So if it is below 1, then the taxes are not responding adequately to the growth in the GDP. So that's a way, and we can do it in the static models and in the dynamic models. And we can do a short-run buoyancy. We can go for a long-run buoyancy. Then what is the speed of adjustment in which the taxes go back to the original, the path? That what was it? Disequilibrium. All these. If he's interested, he can write to me. I have a paper, so I can speak to him one-to-one regarding the technical details. But it's basically the responsiveness of tax to GDP. Yeah.
So one question is from Mr. Diwakar Keskar. I know him personally. He has been working for 30 odd years on ground. So he's very much concerned about the livelihood of laborers unwilling to go back to cities on account of fear. So I believe that is going to be a big problem. So any agriculture policy measures that government should be thinking on right now? So it's a very relevant question, I think.
Yeah, it depends upon our exit strategy. Divakarji, which in the exit strategy, which are the sectors we are going to open up? This agriculture sector, whether it is, we will be giving priority to the agriculture sector in the exit strategy in opening up. That's going to be one important thing. And I think we need to wait and see whether what kind of exit strategy is going to be given to the agriculture sector.
Right. Next is by, I think we have taken up by Shubham Ladda. So again, Narendra Kumar is asking about what will be the role of World Bank and IMF in the post-COVID recovery in India, keeping in consideration the role that India is playing in the present scenario by helping countries with hydrochloroquine. So will we have any benefit of that we are helping other countries by providing HCQ? So would the World Bank and IMF should give us more money? So that is what he's asking about.
He's Shubham, right? Shubham. Whose
Yes,
question was that?
Narendra Kumar. He's Narendra Kumar.
Okay.
Narendra
so
Kumar.
Narendra Kumar. Okay, there are 3 functions for a multilateral organization. One is the knowledge networking and the knowledge sharing. Second is capacity building, and third is lending operations. So to me, the role of a multilateral organization right now, I go for the first two, but lending operations and getting into aid, getting into a financial oligarchy to get our deficit financed, I'm very concerned about that. But I'm happy if they can help us with the capacity building and the knowledge sharing and other than money, because I'm very concerned about getting into the financing of deficit or such kind of aid with a multilateral organization at this moment of time. Otherwise, the relevance of multilateral organizations at this moment is quite huge. Yeah.
Right. They are meant for this. So the next question is by Mr. Rajendra Rasu. He's asking that mint the coin could be an option to overcome FRBM and debt ceiling restrictions, and also the psychological factor against government borrowing. So what are your views on this?
Good question. A good question, Rajinder. You mint the coin, that's the best, rather than going external borrowing. That's what I was talking about, the seigniorage. The moment you call it mint, it's seigniorage is nothing but minting. It's like your change in the high-powered money to GDP. That is technically seigniorage. So this is nothing but going for money financing. So that's what, and I'm very positive for it. But of course, we should have its own. We should have a threshold in our mind that what part of this thing is we are going to money finance. So that excuse me. Yeah, that's very. I'm going to have a little water.
Please. Yes, please.
And if you ask a heterodox economist, they always say that money financing or this mint or the seigniorage, this is one of the, the preferable modes of financing the deficit. But suddenly when this print money and spend, I think the people are new to this idea and they are unable to understand how it's going to happen. It's nothing, but earlier there was deficit financing, that we floated this treasury bills and we financed our deficit. Then later on, I think C. Rangarajan, during his regime, we have this Lekha Chakraborty report, which says that we need to control the monetized deficit. And we controlled it and took the institutional decision, or that was an institutional reform that has happened, that we are going to change the financing pattern of deficit from seigniorage to the bond financing. But India has done that. So maybe going back, this ways and means advances in a way that it was like replacing the monetized deficit. Now we have a little bit of ways and means advances, and RBI has rightly announced a kind of flexibility in that ways and means advances to the states. So it's a kind of going back to a little bit of monetized deficit. And I think it's okay at this moment. You mint, yes.
So we Komal is just texting me that we are having only 2 to 3 minutes. So last question that I would take from Rajendra Rasu is asking about private sector. So how it would survive from this unprecedented action. So that is what is concerned.
Yeah. How to encourage the private corporate investment was one of the main concerns. And we thought that fiscal discipline, good macroeconomic fundamentals, all these things were very relevant in inducing investors' confidence. But when we look into the question, what really determines private corporate investment, I have done a paper with Rishikesh, the econometrician, using this maximum entropy ensembles. We are getting a result that it's the public investment which is going to induce the private corporate investment back. So if your deficit, if you are preempting the loanable funds from the economy to finance the deficit, it will not crowd out your private investment. Rather, if you use it judiciously, that public investment decisions are going to be the prime determinant of the private sector. So this is a very important takeaway, that we are trying to control the deficit, thinking that that's affecting investors' confidence. But if you're using the deficits to use it appropriate public investment measures or the infrastructure investments, it's going to help the private sector. And that's it.
Right. So we are having so many questions, but unfortunately, I'd have to close right now because we are only having 58 seconds remaining for the recording.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much, ma'am, for all of your insightful analysis of the situation. So everybody's concerned and everybody's having so many questions. And of course, economics would have much more questions than anyone else. So yeah, I've been able to answer most of it for all of us. Thank you again for your time. It was wonderful. And we would like to have you sometime again back discussing us on some
my pleasure. Yeah. Yeah, you can share my Twitter handle or my Gmail to them. They can write to me. It should be the beginning. Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank
it should
you
be
so
the
much.
beginning. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
it should
you,
be the beginning. Thank you.
Formally close the session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.